If you're using shared hosting for your business, please stop. Just don't, please. Shared hosting is one of the worst things you can possibly do for your business website. I mean that, folks. In fact, I'm so serious about it that at HostMagi, we recently discontinued our shared hosting plans because they are so bad for business. Now, back in August of 2023, I wrote an article about this very topic, explaining the reasons why shared hosting is so bad for business. But I wanted to go ahead and make a video version of that article and talk about it a little bit. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what shared hosting is, why it's so bad for business, and what you should choose instead. What options are out there? What kind of hosting is best for your business? So we're going to talk about that today. So first of all, I want you to think of shared hosting as like living in an apartment building. When you live in an apartment building, you have neighbors on all sides of you, right? Above you, below you, front, back, left, right. There's a good chance you have neighbors all around you. In the average apartment building, at least. And if those neighbors throw loud parties, or they have loud fights, or they're banging on things, that can affect you. That can affect your peace, your well-being in very negative ways. Shared hosting is a lot like that. If you have another person on the server who is abusing the server, maxing out CPU, RAM, etc., or getting your IP address blacklisted, this is all going to negatively impact you. You see, with shared hosting, you share an IP address and you share resources with other people on the server. You don't have all of that to yourself. So everything they do on their website is going to affect you. And I can promise you that if you're using shared hosting for a business website, you're going to be affected by it. You're going to see your website slow down when joeswidgets.com suddenly gets an influx of traffic and gets 100,000 visits in one day. Or when another neighbor starts sending out spam emails and causes the IP address that you share with that person to get blocked, you're going to get blocked. You're going to have email deliverability problems, and you're going to have website reputation problems on SEO, on search engines. Search engines are going to block you. Not because you necessarily did anything wrong, but because your IP address is associated with website or sites that did do things wrong, that caused that IP address to get blocked. So shared hosting is just bad for business. Don't do it, folks. Don't do it. So, what other options exist? What is the best option for your business? So, the next type of hosting I want to talk to you about is WordPress hosting or managed WordPress hosting. Now, I want to make it clear that in a lot of cases, managed WordPress hosting is still shared hosting. But it's been given a few tweaks to make it a little bit better and a little safer. In some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, you can get a dedicated IP address with managed WordPress. In most cases, you get features such as automatic WordPress updates, an easy-to-use hosting control panel that is easier to use than cPanel and requires much less technical skill. And often, you get a CDN and or a web application firewall, or WAF. These things help to protect you from some of the typical noisy neighbor syndrome effects that shared hosting generally has. So if your managed WordPress plan is a shared plan, then it's still not as good as a more dedicated option, which we'll get to in a minute, but it's better than standard shared hosting for small businesses. Now, WordPress hosting is great for small businesses. Moderate traffic, no super complicated functionality, and no really heavy resource demands. These kinds of sites can do very well on managed WordPress hosting. Now, not all managed WordPress hosting is shared. HostMagi.com managed WordPress hosting is, in fact, a shared hosting plan, but it is configured in a way to mitigate the majority of noisy neighbor syndrome problems. But it still has some drawbacks compared to other higher level plans. But it's still pretty good for very small businesses or startups. Other managed hosting providers, such as WPMU Dev, do actually provide you with dedicated resources. So at HostMagi, we're not a one-size-fits-all. We're not afraid to talk about our competitors and to even refer you to our competitors if we think it's a better fit for you. Because that is what's in alignment with our mission statement. WPMU Dev is a great option for managed WordPress hosting because you get dedicated CPU, you get dedicated RAM, you get dedicated IP address, you get dedicated resources. And it's very easy to use, very user-friendly. You get a bunch of extra stuff with it. So it's a really great plan. It's a really great option. It's not very cheap, though. It's pretty expensive compared to our managed WordPress plans. Let's take a look real quick, just so you can get an example of what managed WordPress plans look like in terms of cost. So over here at HostMagi, our managed WordPress starts at $10 a month for a basic plan. And you go up from there. Okay? So just depending on what you need, these options could be available to you. But you get extra things. You get an SSL included. You get daily malware scans, and this video isn't about highlighting our products. It's about giving you one example of managed WordPress options that can be decent for small businesses. But is managed WordPress really the best for most businesses? No, it is not. In fact, Web Hosting Plus, or business hosting, is usually the best option for the vast majority of businesses. So this is a type of plan that is more like living in a townhouse. You have less neighbors, maybe one neighbor, and you're not as affected by what those neighbors do. Maybe you have thicker walls, better sound protection, or whatever, so that you're not as negatively impacted by those bad actors on the server. You have a container that is yours, just one little container inside the overall server, and this is your container. This is where your site lives, and only your sites live there. Nobody else's lives directly there, so you don't have neighbors as close by, essentially. Your neighbors are better isolated from you, which is what makes it so much better. It's like the power of a VPS, but with an easy-to-use control panel that is excellent for people who don't have a lot of technical skills, people who can't run a server on their own, which is most business owners, to be honest with you. Most business owners are not tech-savvy folks, unless they're in a tech industry, of course. But the guy running the coffee shop down the street, or the doctor who needs a website for his medical practice, don't tend to be real technical, don't tend to have the abilities or the skills to run a server to manage a server. This is where business hosting comes in. The next option is VPS. So VPS, also known as virtual private servers, is essentially a container that you have all to yourself. You don't share with anybody else. You have dedicated resources, so you have guaranteed amounts of RAM, CPU, etc. Very much similar to the Web Hosting Plus and business plans that we talked about a moment ago. But you have to manage everything. With a VPS, most VPSs are self-managed. There is such thing as a fully managed VPS. We'll get into those here in a minute. But most VPSs are self-managed. That means you have to maintain not only your website, but all of the software on your server. You have to maintain the configuration files for things like Nginx, PHP, Apache. If you don't know what any of those things are, if I'm talking to a foreign language to you, then VPS probably is not for you. If you don't know how to do those things yourself, then you have to hire somebody who does. This is called a system administrator. So you've got to hire a sysadmin, which is going to cost you at minimum about $100,000 a year. Okay? So you're going to pay your hosting fees on top of a sysadmin, and you're going to pay well over $100,000 a year to do all these things in order to maintain this server. So for most small businesses, VPS is really not the best option either. Finally, we have dedicated servers. So a dedicated server is basically you are the only person on that physical server. You're the only it's like having a house. You live in a house. You're the only person in there. Your neighbors are far enough away that you're not impacted by them in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's more than just having a house. It's like having a farm, a place out in the country where your nearest neighbor is hundreds of yards away. That is what having a dedicated server is like. Nobody else there to affect you, nobody to impact you, to slow your website down, to bring your website down. Dedicated servers are intended for major businesses, huge business, major corporations like Amazon, Walmart, CNN, other news networks, streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, etc. These are the types of companies that will use dedicated hosting. Now, dedicated hosting can do just about anything you could throw at it with the right server. But, as you can see here, dedicated hosting is not cheap at all. Our plans, which are fairly competitive to the rest of the market, start at $173 a month for a dedicated server. Sure, you get a lot of resources, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. And again, you have to have a system administrator to maintain that server for you, to make sure things stay up to date, to maintain the security of that server, installing SSLs, everything. So without a sysadmin, you are not going to do very well on a dedicated server unless you are a very technical person. So again, not really recommended. So in conclusion, the very best plan that you can possibly get is a business type hosting plan. A fully managed hosting plan that has dedicated resources that belong to you and nobody else. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.